All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking to you. And let me just get my face on the screen. And also, we're going to be welcoming to Halitics a new guest, a new caller, Seth Donnelly from Taxpayers Against Genocide. And we're getting a little bit of background noise from Seth, but it's more than worth it to have him on. I know you're out on the street, Seth. So tell us about what you're doing right now to try to end the genocide in Gaza.
Yes, Hal. Thank you. Is that a little better? Hopefully.
Yeah, we're doing okay. You're doing okay. I got you loud and clear.
Okay, good, great. So we're here in D.C. It was really good to meet you in person just the other day. So Taxpayers Against Genocide is a growing grassroots movement across the U.S., which, as it sounds, is a movement of taxpayers who we're all united about being revolted that it's our tax dollars funding the deepening genocide in Palestine. So we, of course, many of us are also inspired by the work of tax resistors, like the war tax resistors have been doing work for years and years, and people make their individual choices to resist in that manner. But we're also trying to organize ourselves collectively as a movement to demand criminal prosecution of U.S. government officials for direct participation in the genocide. We recognize that it wouldn't last a day if it weren't for U.S. support, and that as those that provide the funding for the U.S. government were the base. So the buck stops with us. And so what we did, we've been working with the National Lawyers Guild International Committee and a team of amazing attorneys, including Huwaida Araf. She's been the lead attorney with us on this project. We just came to D.C. to file a complaint, a legal complaint against the U.S. government with the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. And this complaint essentially charges the U.S. government with complicity in genocide. And so we did that on Wednesday, this Wednesday, May 14th. And I'll just add a little bit more about that. It's true that the commission doesn't have jurisdiction to criminally prosecute U.S. officials. Well, the only body in the world that can do that would be the International Criminal Court, which it does have that capacity. But the commission is significant. It is the government, it's set up under the OAS, the Organization of American States. It is the official body in the Americas to deal with legal complaints involving human rights violations. So we want to build that record internationally, including in the Western Hemisphere, the record of findings that show the United States and confirm what we already know, but put it on the international record that the U.S. government is in fact guilty of participation in genocide, and then that can become leverage for more powerful prosecution in the future. So that's what we did on Wednesday. Huwaida Araf came from Detroit to join us. Many of us came from California. We were overjoyed to meet people like yourself here in the D.C. area, and so that's been filed. And in the meantime, we're continuing to organize with folks across the country.
Yeah, it's tremendous work what you're doing, Seth. Let me just jump in. The news is unremittingly grim from Gaza. We did have a brief pause when Trump took office, and I guess I at least got my hopes up a little tiny bit that maybe the killing was in our rearview mirror. Not in the least. Israel's ramped up its bombing, now occupying with its army pretty much the entire Gaza Strip. Over 100 killed yesterday. We're seeing basically 100 or more a day. Thousands of children every few weeks are slaughtered, or every month or so are killed by Israel. Do you see? We see public opinion is turning even more strongly against Israel, but it doesn't seem to impact on our government. Where do you see the leverage points that we may have, including your lawsuit?
Yeah, well, I think that ultimately, it's going to come down to the grassroots people power, and what's needed, particularly in terms of this context, particularly here in the United States, since again the U.S. is, the ultimate, as Dr. King said way back in his great speech, Riverside Church speech in 1967, that the U.S. is the greatest purveyor of violence in the world, and so until we actually organize to demand not just a resolution in Congress that will never pass, but actually demand on an international arena criminal prosecution of our government officials for genocide, then this will continue. And that obviously is to some listeners or viewers that may seem like a real stretch, but it's the right stretch to make. It's we need to uphold the Nuremberg principles. We need to recognize that like as Malcolm X was saying before his assassination, that the UN is the appropriate body, and international arena is the right body to deal with the United States. The U.S. court system itself is incapable, and that's part of what Hueda explained, and we explained in the complaint we filed, is that we've already gone through the federal court system. We started with a Taxpayers Against Genocide started as a mass class action lawsuit in Northern California against our congresspersons for illegally using our tax dollars to fund genocide. And that lawsuit was predictably dismissed this last February. It was certainly important to exhaust that channel and to positions us to now be where we are now. But what they did in our case is also what the court system did in reference to a previous class action against Biden administration filed by Palestinian plaintiffs, represented by the Center for Constitutional Rights. That was dismissed, before ours, and we thought we might have a different angle. We supported their case 100%, but we thought with our angle being taxpayers that would give us some more leverage, and we had a legally correct argument. But in both our cases, the court said that we were posing a quote-unquote political question, and the court had no jurisdiction to intervene over such matters. And of course, that's absurd. The court intervenes all the time on issues of policy that the other branches of government carry out. It's just choosing not to intervene when it comes to involvement in genocide and war crimes. So what that means is that we need to go to the international level, and in doing so, we organize across state lines with each other. We connect our
So I just want to jump in real quick because I just want to clarify things in my mind as you're speaking. The lawsuit that you filed, and I put the press release on screen. I don't think you can see it right now unless you're on the live stream through YouTube or Facebook. But this is the press conference that you held and you referenced on Wednesday at the National Press Club. U.S. taxpayers to file historic legal complaint in D.C. So, pointed question, in what court or what jurisdiction or venue did you file that complaint?
Sure. So that was filed with the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. That is set up under the OAS, the Organization of American States. And it's a government body, a court, if you will, that takes human rights complaints in the Americas. So there's been previous times where the U.S., there's been complaints against the U.S. for human rights violations. Like I believe there was one during Trump's first term over children being separated from their parents as part of the war on immigrants. So that's the body we went to, and I think they are able to take complaints by civil society organizations. So we, as a mass movement, working with the National Lawyers Guild, filed this complaint with them. Now they can choose to have a hearing, in which case we would come back to D.C. and mobilize, for that. We submitted affidavits as part of this complaint that the affidavits were evidence provided by Palestinian plaintiffs who've lost loved ones. One of the lead plaintiffs in this complaint lost 43 family members in Gaza, and his son came to D.C. to represent him. This plaintiff lives in the Bay Area, California. These are Palestinian American plaintiffs, I should clarify. And his son was part of the press conference. So we have evidence, and if they have a hearing, then we would hope they do, because it gives us a chance to further educate the public and put pressure on the U.S. Then that would be part of this judicial process. The end goal would be for the commission to make a ruling of guilt, to find the United States government is guilty of complicity in genocide, which again they can't prosecute, but that becomes important leverage point to support litigation, potential litigation before the International Criminal Court, which can prosecute U.S. officials.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, was can the findings of this Inter-American Court be used in a proceeding where there is actual power to hold people accountable?
The commission by itself can't, cannot criminally prosecute. So that, the value of the commission, although I would say it's not simply performative. The value of the commission, if they make a ruling, which we expect they will, that the United States is guilty of participation in genocide, that's a serious official ruling by the main official human rights body in the Americas. And it also provides a chance for us and other organizations that are part of this. Like when we say who's part of this, it includes many different organizations that are part of this effort, like Palestinian Youth Movement. There's so many orgs like CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations, the International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network, and many others. And we're hoping, of course, to work more with JVP.
Doctors Against Genocide was very prominent at that hearing, and seems to me, from even my own personal perspective, but from my observations and talking to others, that organization has a lot of credibility. It has a lot of gravitas, and people, when they hear about Doctors Against Genocide and its outspoken opposition to the Israeli killing, the massacres, that gives them pause, even if they tend to be Zionist, they tend to be pro-Israel. Right. No, it's an amazing organization. Of course, they participated in the press conference. Dr. Nidal Jabor, one of the co-founders, was there. And so DAG and TAG are united, along with many other orgs. And so going back to your question about what can be done with this, well, all of these groups that are part of this complaint, it allows us to network with other organizations and progressive governments in the Western Hemisphere to further isolate the U.S. government for its role. And again, the end goal then would be eventually to refer the United States government to the ICC for criminal prosecution of U.S. officials. Now, the Trump administration just issued an executive order about a month ago or longer that prohibits people here from working with the ICC under the threat of sanction. So obviously there's a nerve there, right? But that's crucial, is that we organize for the U.S. to be held accountable by the International Criminal Court, and that there's an end to this impunity. When that happens, in a real way, it's not just, the ICC issued an arrest warrant and they arrested Duterte in the Philippines. Of course, that there's a struggle around Netanyahu and the arrest warrant for him. But we really need to have him come after the rich and powerful, the center, and that's here. 100%. I love what you're doing there, Seth. Do you see any political solution in the United States? I just put on screen less than half in U.S. now sympathetic toward Israelis. In the latest kind of, I guess, performative vote, 30 Democratic senators, I think that's the most we've seen, voiced disapproval of the Israeli blockade of all food, aid, water into Gaza. So, wow, 30 out of 100 actually say it's wrong to starve people to death and to prevent them from even having water or medical aid. Do you see there's any real likelihood that there'll be a significant enough groundswell against this in Congress to stop it?
Well, I think that, politically, there's many powerful movements that are streams feeding hopefully into what will be a larger river of larger unified movement like the kinds that we saw, particularly in the 1960s and 70s. But politically, the focus of taxpayers, virtually everybody at the working class level and a lot of the middle class are just fed up with the tax system. We understand, many of us understand. I've been a high school teacher for almost 25 years, and I was paying a higher tax rate on my income tax, of course, than the billionaires. And people get that, whether you're a nurse, a teacher, whatever it is you're doing, you're paying a large chunk of your income tax. What do you got to show for it? Where's the health care? Where's the infrastructure? Where's the housing, et cetera? And at the same time, as you become more and more aware that instead of those things, our taxes are being used to contract with companies that make 2,000-pound bombs like General Dynamics and creating profit for them, and then being used to exterminate the Palestinian people and other peoples throughout the world, right? There's a slow-motion genocide happening in Haiti that's not hitting the headlines at all right now. Half the population is experiencing acute hunger, and that's a direct result of the U.S. interference and domination. So as more and more of us who just at that base level understand, and it goes beyond Democrats and Republicans altogether. Most of us in TAG don't identify that a party at all, because we're fed up with that system. So that, I think, has the power to unite large numbers of people and shake up the system and at least be one of the streams of a larger river that will shake up the system for real.
Yeah, I love that you're working outside the two-party structure. I think that's critical. I don't see any real answer as long as we as long as we try to defend one of the parties as lesser of evil or better or something that protects them, right, from having to take moral stances and from taking on the billionaire class. So I think what you're doing is spot on, Seth. I really appreciate that. I've already kept you longer than you probably have. Final words, how people can support you. I've got your link on the screen. It says Seth Donnelly, Taxpayers Against Genocide.org. But any information you want people to bear in mind or ways they can try to stop this crime, this atrocity.
Yeah. Well, many thanks, Hal, for reaching out. Again, it was really nice to meet you in person on the street. And like you said, the best way at this point for any listeners on the East and the D.C. area or wherever your reach is, go to our website. That's a good, Taxpayers Against Genocide.org. That there's a way to immediately sign up so that you can be part of the network, and then we can, communicate with each other. We're also, if you go into the social medias platforms, it's Taxpayers Against Genocide. You'll see us there. But we're at this point. I haven't looked at the database recently, but we're around I think 3,000 taxpayers across the country, and I just heard that folks in Minnesota are filing their own class action against their congresspersons. Just because we got shut down in Northern California doesn't mean that it's not worthwhile to sue in other federal court districts. And maybe because our argument, we will share our class action argument with anybody serious about this. We have and we would like to see folks try and sue congressmen in their area, and maybe they'll have more success than we did. But in the meantime, we can all work together around this international push. And so please do go to our website. Once we get back on the ground in California, we'll have our complaint and updated media coverage from there on the website so people can learn more about that. And the complaint, I really want to give a final shout out to Huwaida Araf, the lead attorney, also one of the organizers of the Freedom Flotilla work going back years and years. The complaint is really serious. It's like a 133-page complaint with the affidavits. It's worth reading and sharing that with friends and comrades and family members because it really lays out that the source of this genocide is right here in the USA.
Seth, thank you so much for what you're doing. I appreciate it greatly. I know my viewers and listeners do as well. Don't be a stranger, and I'll be reaching out to you as well.
Right on, Hal. And if you're on the West, look us up.
I'm going to do that. I'll be out in Sunnyvale in June. So I'll let you know before I head out there.
Okay, well, let's talk.
All right, man. You take care. That's Seth Donnelly. Seth Donnelly from Taxpayers. Oh, let me get that caller muted off the screen there. You don't want to see that. Seth Donnelly from Taxpayers Against Genocide. And we so appreciate him joining us today on Halitics. And I've got a clip from that event we were on. We were at, both of us. But real quick, just the numbers. I referenced them, but and I didn't want to take up any time away from Seth and his important words. But we do see, this is from Vatican News, by the way. I'm glad to see the Vatican News is covering the daily carnage there in Gaza that the Israeli military is wreaking. Over 53,000. And the actual number that we have is... oh, it's just so awful. 53,119, according to Anadolu Ajansi, the Turkish agency. That was as of this morning. 53,119 identified Gazans, with 109 yesterday as a result of Israeli bombing campaign. And again, we don't let Trump off the hook, even though we put a lot of the blame for this on Harris Biden. Since March 18th through May 15th, we've seen 2,990 Gazans a minimum, and I'm guesstimating maybe up to 2,000 children. Probably the number's a little bit lower, but the total death count includes a majority of children and women. So they're not combatants. They're not Hamas fighters. And every time Israel claims that it's attacking Hamas, it may be lying, and it certainly is trying to cover up the deaths of dozens of civilians for every one Hamas militant they may kill. 240-242-5646 if you want to join me. We had a great call just now from Seth Donnelly, Taxpayers Against Genocide. Really appreciate that. I do want to play a clip because I mentioned that great organization, Doctors Against Genocide, and they have so much, I guess, goodwill. People just respect them. They respect the fact that these are, influential people with a degree, people who are caregivers, who are life givers, and they're saying, we are life givers. We cannot support. We cannot be silent at the shocking destruction, the loss of life, the taking of life. We cannot be silent. Here, this is from that rally. Here's a video I took. I posted one on Facebook. I didn't post this one. The one on Facebook has gotten a lot of hits. I wanted to share this. This will include the introduction, and maybe we'll play a minute or so of the doctor speaking. See if we can get it to play. Doesn't want to play. Typical.
Anybody from Doctors Against Genocide, many organizations have come together for this historic complaint. Doctors Against Genocide is one of them. We greatly admire and appreciate their work. Yes. Another organization, Black Alliance for Peace as well.
Hello everyone. Marhaba. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for being here. We as Doctors Against Genocide are here because we are witnessing a crime against humanity, a crime against life, a crime against medicine, a crime against everything we cherish in this world. This crime is being committed by the United States of America, by the government of the United States of America, by the Congress of the United States of America, and Israel is the one who is carrying this crime. As doctors, as healthcare workers, as people who swore an oath to protect life, we will not stay silent. We refuse to be complicit. It is our job to be here.
Just real quick, apology for the little bit of jumpiness in the camera. Just was trying to get a close-up, and we did get the close-up there of the doctor speaking with the megaphone, but obviously it's a little, it's not ideal, but you can hear him, you can understand him. He's talking about a crime against humanity in the United States. guilty of it with Israel as the actor doing the bidding of the United States government. And here we go with certainly with the support of the U.S. government. I don't know if I would say it was at the bidding necessarily, but certainly with the full support of bipartisan support.
It is our job to mobilize. It is our job to join everyone to stop this mass slaughter, to stop this genocide, not in our name, not with our money, not with our taxes. We will refuse. That's why we are calling upon all the American people, all the people who care about their conscience, about their country, about the strategic interests of the United States, to mobilize, to fix America, to do what is right for America, not to let it be destroyed by corrupt politicians, by corrupt presidents, by corrupt elected officials who are being bought by the AIPAC and others. They are not listening to the people. They do not represent the people. We, the people here in the United States and all over the world, are better than this. We refuse to have our money being used to mass slaughter children, to mass slaughter mothers, fathers, grandfathers, and to starve them to death. Shame. Thank you for being here. Every action counts. Every voice counts. We need to do more. We need to speak louder. We need to get more people on board, because enough is enough. And our call is bread, not bombs.
Bread, not bombs.
Bread, not bombs. Bread, not bombs. Bread, not bombs. Let the children eat. Let the children eat. Let the children eat. Let the children eat.
Yeah, so there it is. Let the children eat, and very powerful from the doctor speaking. And you heard the doctor's order, which is we need more people and we need to speak louder. And that's all we can do, right? I mean, I don't know that there's anything else. Try to throw as many monkey wrenches into this broken, corrupt, as the doctor said, and ultimately genocidal system. Got a lot of other stories I wanted to get to, but I absolutely want to, as I always do, center the crime, the Israeli-American crime. And glad to have Seth Donnelly on. Very glad indeed. We'll have, by the way, next week, today is a free-for-all. We're going to have, Monday will just be, I think, I don't have a guest. Arlen Tuesday. Wednesday, we've got Kristen Grimm returning to Halitics. Kristen Marie Grimm from Mothers for Medicare for All. And so I'm looking forward to talking to Kristen again as we focus on healthcare. I wanted to, and a big part of today's program really, and it's all the programs, every single one is, politics. How do we bring about change, right? I mean, Barack Obama became the first black president because he said he was going to bring about hope and change. Americans are desperate for change. And sadly, Obama kind of made things worse in a lot of ways. I'm not going to say he's the worst president of this millennium, but, the competition is fierce for that honorific. There hasn't really been a good president in this millennium. But Barack Obama certainly did not ultimately make things better. And we can see it everywhere. So this is the New York Times article. I was thinking, you say, well, wait a second, Hal, you're talking about a transit strike. Your link here on the screen is to this New Jersey transit strike, leaving commuters scrambling. How does that relate to Barack Obama? Well, I just wanted to show you this because they have a picture of the Newark train station there because it's New Jersey, so there's a strike there. And the people are in that beautiful Rococo, I guess, or I'm not sure what exactly the architectural style is, but you can see the New York, especially the New York train stations, but around the country, they're very ornate. They have the marble in there. It's really quite beautiful. Very high ceilings, really temples to industry and to transit. And as soon as I saw this picture, I said, I know there's going to be a homeless person in it because we just take it for granted. We just take it for granted in America that there are folks everywhere on the streets, in public spaces, who don't have anywhere to go. And it's just almost become part of the landscape. So I mentioned Obama because, did he address this? I don't feel like he did. I don't feel like the steps that he took were designed to help the poorest, the least among us. And we've seen the problem get ever worse because of neoliberal policies that he endorsed, that he supported, obviously, that Bill Clinton put into place in the 1990s, that had come from Reagan before him, and George W. Bush, H.W. Bush, Trump, Biden. There's no recognition. There's no acknowledgement that we have to take care of people, that's our duty. That's part of being a human. And so here we go. I blew it up. So you just see, there's a man just sitting there in the corner, with his knees clasped, his head down. And that's just par for the course in American cities. It shouldn't be okay. It shouldn't be just, and I can say that. It's easy to say it shouldn't be okay. We shouldn't take this for granted. We shouldn't normalize it. People should have homes. That's part of what makes living tolerable. That's part of what makes living brings possible joy into your life. It's a bare minimum. And we aren't doing it. And neither party is doing it. Neither party is championing poor, struggling, and working people. And that's wrong. But it is an opening. It's an opening. Now, Friday Free for Alls, we tend to go back and look at what we talked about over the week. So one potential part of the solution, part of the answer that our great green guest, Andy, proposed, and we're talking right now about the poorest of the poor, people who have nowhere to go, who don't have a roof that they can sleep under every single night. I guess you could say, well, that man at the Newark Penn Station, maybe he has a roof. He can sleep under the roof of that station, but I'm sure it closes at night. They push people out. It's not his roof. So Andy and I discussed this, and part of the answer is it reparations. And I just keep going back and forth. I'll be honest, I want your help on this. I really do, because I go back and forth. Reparations are not popular among any group except for Black Americans, except for African Americans. Otherwise, they're not popular. They're divisive. They pit poor, struggling, working people against each other. There's no way around that. I know Andy talked about finessing that. I know he talked about, hey, reparations don't have to be just for the descendants of slaves, and not necessarily for all descendants of slaves. And they're not necessarily cash payouts, but rather we address communities that have been hit hard. And I agree with doing all of that. And certainly we've seen African American communities, not just as a result, not just because of slavery, or not just because of what happened during slavery, but since then, inner vibrant working class neighborhoods ripped apart by interstate highways, by gentrification, by the shuttering of factories. And the people who are victims of those actions should be afforded help. But what if they're not big? See, the thing is, a lot of these actions, and we can go back to the 1950s and terrible policies that many city officials followed. Talk about Robert Moses, the power broker from the 30s through the 60s, pursued all manner of transit policies that were targeting middle class, upper middle class, and affluent New Yorkers to make life easier for them, to make it easy for people on the Upper East Side to get to the beaches in Connecticut, to make it easy to get to Long Island beaches. Recreation for the middle class, upper middle class, and wealthy. For the poor, the working class, who were disproportionately Black, but not only African American, including many obviously Latinos, many ethnic New Yorkers, whether Italian, Irish, Jewish Americans who, had not achieved what we might call the American dream, the home that they own, but were living in apartments, maybe in the Bronx, Brooklyn, what have you. And they were victims too. So how do we repair those harms in a fair and just manner? And unless we have a policy, I believe, that is to a significant degree, not completely colorblind, but that looks to people's current income, current status, to harms that they personally suffered, rather than that were inflicted on ancestors, I think you'll run into a very serious political headwinds, and you'll also not solve problems that you're trying to solve. Again, such as that homeless person in the Newark Penn Station, and there are many others just like him. What if he is homeless because he is an alcoholic, or he just ran into really bad luck, or he's mentally ill, but he isn't a member of a group, an identifiable group that can say, okay, here's how my people, my neighborhood was harmed specifically. So we have to always bear in mind that ultimately individuals deserve our help. We help people individually. We can help communities, but the community comprises individuals. And I think that's where the conversation about reparations becomes very, very thorny, because groups will argue, well, my community was hurt. I'm a victim because my community was targeted. My community was ripped apart by a highway. My community was harmed by a coal-fired generator that caused massive cancer rates in the within a radius of 5 miles of the plant. And those are all legit. We should look at that. But then people start arguing, well, mine goes first, mine this, mine. I think we have to adopt a policy where we provide assistance to all who are victims, all who are suffering, and we have to guarantee a minimum standard of living. That includes healthcare for all, right? So if your community suffers high rates of cancer, well, we may not be able to cure that. We may not be able to get the asbestosis or the coal dust out of your lungs or out of your children's lungs. That's a bridge beyond our capability. But what we can do is make sure you'll always get all the medical treatment that we can provide and never have to pay for it out of pocket. That's what we can do. We can make sure you're always going to have a roof over your head. And I think that's got to be the starting point. So from Michael here, commenting on the Andy Ellis appearance Wednesday, forcing the innocency. And this is the argument that you hear over and over. And I'll respond to it, but I'm not totally rejecting Michael's point either. And I want help on this. What do we do? Michael called in, a different Michael, Michael P., a different Michael called in and said, hey, it's racist. I believe he said this. If you oppose reparations for descendants of slaves, something similar to this. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but if you oppose reparations for African-American victims of racist policies, of policy that disproportionately negatively impacted Black people, if you oppose those, then there's racism involved. And I don't do that. I don't call people names. I understand their arguments, their opposition. But I also recognize, the African-American community writ large needs our help. Plenty of other communities do. And not every African-American obviously does either. And I think it hurts a little bit the cause of African-American activists that, like, for example, last night I'm watching the Oklahoma City Denver Nuggets basketball game, and they're, it's definitely it's a checkerboard. There's blacks and whites. There are great black players, there are great white players. There's a guy on Oklahoma City who's mixed race, who's, I believe, part Vietnamese, Jalen Williams. There's two Jalen Williams, and the Jalen Williams, who I think is spelled Jay capital Lin, and the Lin stands for, I think, his Japanese name. That's what my son said anyway. So, the NBA is a multi-ethnic, multiracial league without question, but I believe it's still predominantly African American, and the players are all making millions, I believe. I think minimum salary, there's $1 million. Maybe not. I mean, you play for a week, you don't get $1 million, but it's very, very high, and it hurts the cause that there's a lot of very wealthy, high-profile blacks. That doesn't mean we don't recognize the challenges facing the community, but it means that it's harder to unite support for a compensation that presumably would include these extremely well compensated and presumably reasonably happy people who get to play a game for a living. So here's what Michael P. Coffey says: forcing the innocent to pay non-victims for something that happened to neither of them is not reparations. And I understand what they're saying. They're saying, hey, it's not really reparation. You're saying, okay, well, Barack Obama's daughters, Malia and Sasha, they are descendants of slaves. That's absolutely a fact. They are absolutely descendants of slaves. Now, Barack Obama is not a descendant of slaves, but Michelle Obama is, and their daughters are. And the idea that American taxpayers, who include lower income Americans, should be paying out of their pockets money to first daughters is not going to go over well. It's not going to sit well. And that's why, if you are going to support this policy, and I see a lot of benefits to it, you better make it real clear that the people who are going to get the remuneration, who are going to get the benefits, are people who need it, who are going to, because it's not based on a right. It's not the right, hey, we all get health care. We all get, which we all should get, but we don't, but we all get health care. We all get a secure home. That kind of a policy will be popular because poor working class people will say, well, wait, I'm getting mine too. I'm getting my doctor's visits paid for too. My kids are getting their inoculations too, and it becomes much more popular. So here's from Pew: black and white Americans are far apart in their views of reparations for slavery. And by the way, it's not just black and white. It's black Americans are far apart from Latino and Asian Americans as well, although not quite as far apart, right? So the white Americans are least in favor of reparations for slavery, and black Americans by far the most supportive of the policy of the proposal. This is something you got to bear. You want to win. You want to get elected. You want to enact policies that are going to make you more popular. Yes, targeted aid for African Americans makes a lot of sense, but only, I believe, politically in the context of targeted aid for all poor, struggling, and working class Americans, and middle class too. If it's, when it comes to to what I would call human rights, healthcare, education, and the like. And just so that you understand, I wanted to bring this up too, because we're talking about communities that have been victimized, that have been harmed by government policies that are also, because if you're going to say, well, and Andy made this point, which I respect, it's not just African American communities that have been harmed, or African Americans whose communities have been decimated by government policy. So I did look this up. This is really interesting. I think we look at people in Appalachia and we say, well, those are folks who've really gotten in the neck too. So this is from the International Socialist Review of a book by Stephen Stoll, Ramp Hollow, The Ordeal of Appalachia. And the reviewer goes through the book, says it's really outstanding, and the history of Appalachia is a history of dispossession, of the folks who live there being harmed. So, and also being looked down upon, being treated as less than. So the reviewer starts with the quote from Mencken, the sage, I think it was called, of Baltimore, wrote for the Baltimore Sun for decades, a very often caustic writer, extremely glib, intelligent, but looked down on people, had a mean streak to him. So Mencken once wrote that poor whites in Appalachia live in an isolated backwater, and they're more like Neanderthals than Homo sapiens. So he's saying they're not even fully human. Right? I mean, that's the implication. At least they resemble that. And it's not like, oh, these poor folks, we really need to help them out. It's just like they're not really like us. They're different. They're other. That's what Mencken is saying. And that's, back a kind of a backdrop to 200 years or more of policies, government policies that hurt these folks. So the writer demonstrates that Appalachian poverty is a result of taking their land, dispossession of agrarians because they're farmers, small farmers, extracting and the extraction and destruction of natural resources by outsiders. So the extraction of coal mainly, and destruction of beautiful areas, because it is much of it beautiful areas, hollows with the creeks running through them, being destroyed. And also their exploitation as wage laborers in mines. So you have these people going down in the mines from a very young age, children, and then, 20, 30 years, maybe dying of silicosis or black lung disease, paid a pittance. That's their lives. So I guess if they looked a little more like Neanderthals than the lawyers and doctors and stockbrokers that H.L. Mencken was hanging out with at the Baltimore Harbor, I guess we can understand that. If we're going to have reparations, I think we need to recognize the harm that deliberate government policies, which made it easy for elites to buy up lots of land, to be absentee landlords in that area, to befoul the creeks and rivers. We've got to make sure that we're going to address the poverty, the deep poverty in Appalachia as well. We're going to have a fair and equitable reparations policy. I don't oppose that, but what I'm saying is, if you're going to investigate how to provide redress for folks who've been harmed, for communities that have been harmed by elites with the backing of the U.S. government or state governments, I think it needs to move beyond simply African American communities or communities within urban areas, obviously. All right, 240-242-5646. One of the arguments that, and that's for a couple of reasons. One, morally, I don't know that the folks in Appalachia are less deserving. I don't like to categorize any victim as more or less deserving than another victim. Even if you take a homeless person who I met, maybe they're, the child of I knew a homeless person who was from a wealthy family, absolutely, and inherited money. And after a few years of squandering the inheritance, was homeless again. Now, I would look at that person and I would think they're really not that deserving victim, right? I mean, they had it all. It was all handed to them on a silver platter. But you know what? They still should have a home. They still should have a roof over their head. And maybe they don't own their own home, but they still should have a place they can go every night that's totally secure, not sleeping on the beach, not sleeping under a bridge. They should have health care whenever they need it, good food, place to clean, a shower. Yeah, I'm not going to say, okay, this poor person, I don't have the same innate sympathy for somebody who made a lot of what I would call very poor decisions, poor choices that led to their current situation. But even so, I don't want to, when it comes to actually helping somebody out who needs help, I don't want to categorize and choose one victim as more or less deserving than another. We heard the argument from, Michael, well, hey, there's been reparations for other groups. There are for Japanese Americans and for Holocaust survivors. And I think they're a little bit different because the Japanese American reparations were for survivors, people who had actually been interned during World War II. We know it was wrong. They were imprisoned because they were Japanese Americans, because they came, their parents, their grandparents, or they themselves were born in Japan. Well, that was wrong. We shouldn't have assumed, there shouldn't have been a presumption that you're an enemy of the country because you're Japanese, even if it's true we were attacked by the Japanese Navy and Army or Air Force in World War II. All right, so what? That doesn't, these folks are Americans. You have evidence that somebody's, you've got evidence that somebody's sending wireless code in Japanese. Okay, then investigate. But you don't get to just lock people up. It's wrong. It's clearly wrong. And virtually everyone was innocent and they had to be living in camps. It was horrible. So we're directly complaining for harm that they suffered, right? And I know Andy is saying, well, that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to help folks who suffered harm. And I'm good with that. I really am. So to the extent that that's what the program's about, let's do that. There was reparations that Obama signed into law. Here it is. And I'm really, this one really, now I think the Japanese reparations were correct. Japanese Americans that was the right policy, 100%. This one I'm a little bit more mixed on. The U.S. government didn't commit the Holocaust, right? Now, we didn't do enough to stop it early on. We didn't address it early on. We didn't protect victims who we could have maybe saved, or some we could have saved. We sent them back to Germany. Some. That's really, really bad. But the U.S. government, the American people, didn't commit the Holocaust, nor did we make it worse or exacerbate it or facilitate it the way we are the Gazan Holocaust, right? For that, we're guilty, or at least our government is. And, if we're not speaking loudly against it, we're not doing what we can to stop it, I guess we are too. This is a little different. Why should the American taxpayer assist Holocaust survivors, right? We didn't do it. Why are they more entitled? Why should they be singled out for largesse when there's plenty of others who need help too? And we didn't hurt these people. But I see the other side of it, which is, and if you read this story, I don't know, I'm going to try to blow it up for you. Apparently, it's $12 million, not a huge amount, but still, it's money. I didn't put this in the box, in the deck, but the $12 million was set aside for impoverished Holocaust survivors. Apparently, at the time of that bill signing, 2015, 25% of Americans who survived the Holocaust, I mean, they were originally German or European, but those who lived in the United States who had survived the Holocaust, 25% of them were impoverished. So that's a high level. That's a high number. That's above the poverty rate by a significant amount. So if you're saying, hey, we want to help out these folks who had a bad, rough go of it, and now, I mean, really rough go of it, and now, understandably, unsurprisingly, their lives haven't gone as well as maybe many others have, so we're going to help them out. That I'm good with. But I'm not still certain why they should get money versus other homeless people. Because if we're going to say, well, okay, the Holocaust survivors, 25%, not homeless, but poor. Some are probably homeless, but most are just poor. We should help them. But I'm not sure why they deserve more help from the U.S. government than other poor people, many of whom don't get any help. That's where I'm kind of a little bit stuck on that one. That said, we should help out poor people, all poor people. So we shouldn't we shouldn't say we're not going to help out the Holocaust survivors who are impoverished because we don't help out, I don't know, Italian Americans who are impoverished. We should help both out. It's a really tough question, right? Because, what groups are more entitled, what are less entitled? And again, that's why I go to this, let's not do it by identity. Let's do it by need. Let's make sure we all have enough and none have too much. And once we've done that, we'll be in a much, much better place to look at specific groups, specific cohorts, and say, okay, they need a little extra. We've now taken steps to eliminate the poverty, or at least the deepest poverty in Appalachia and in African American inner cities. Everyone's getting health care now. We're spending much more to make sure every school is renovated, is a really nice place for kids to go, feels like a home, right? We're doing all of that. So now we still see there are pockets of deep poverty in West Virginia, in the South Bronx. Even with all that we've done, yes, it's not as bad as it was, but still there are some bombed out buildings. Crime rates are still way too high. So we're going to address those problems next. It seems to me that's the best way to do it, to build popular support, to not engender tremendous resentment among the population who feel like they're not getting what they deserve, who feel like they're being left behind. So I just wanted to stick with reparations for one more, because this is, and I think we have to bear this history in mind. When the argument for specific race-based remedies the arguments are not nebulous. They're not insignificant. They're real. I'm not ruling them out. I'm saying I think our first order business has to be guaranteeing all have enough. But when you look at a story like this, so when slave owners got reparations, which it's absolutely true, what happened? When Lincoln, or after Lincoln freed the slaves in the North, he signed a bill to pay the former enslavers up to $300 per human being that they had owned, that they had whose labor they had stolen, whose lives they had ruined, whose children they had maybe sold or beaten or raped. So they got money. Those enslavers, those terrorists, right? They're terrorists. They terrorized the people that they enslaved to force them to do work. Now, I mean, I understand that not every enslaver was some kind of inhuman monster. There's this movie called 12 Years a Slave, and the man who wrote that diary, he had been kidnapped. He was a free African American. He was kidnapped and sold south, and he describes his experiences, and some were blood-curdlingly awful. And at least one of the enslavers, he describes as a decent person. So I'll accept that, I guess. I'm not going to, get into that. But obviously there's variations. But all that said, the people who stole that man's labor and every other human being's labor, they shouldn't have gotten compensation for it. They should, but they did. So when you look at that record, you say, well, wait a second. Those enslavers got money, and maybe their great-great-great-grandkids now have some of it. What about the great-great-great-grandkids of those that they enslaved and whose labor they sold? And I really, really get that argument. And I don't have my counter is, well, guarantee all have enough and none have too much. And then we can start dealing with the continuing inequities. Because guaranteeing all have enough and none have too much will reduce tremendously the injustices that still remain as a result of the legacy of that horrible centuries-long crime. What should Americans be, or what should Democrats do right now in response to Trump? Because you've got this big, beautiful bill Trump is talking about, and I'm going to just go through it real quick because we're already over an hour and I don't have a whole bunch of time, but I just wanted to share a little bit about this and sort of my thoughts on what Democrats should do in response. So I won't go through the whole deck, and maybe we'll continue this on Monday. It's not going to die out. This topic isn't going to die in one day or over a weekend. But there's a lot in that bill, and in some of it, I think Democrats need to have a forceful opposition to, and others sometimes you just hold your tongue. You just don't say anything. And so we'll go through that real quick. So here's, and also I'll try to reference public opinion surveys and the like that kind of give us some insight into what would be an appropriate response by Democrats. Also, but you know what? I haven't said this yet. Click like. I did play the subscribe GIF while we were talking to our great guest earlier in the program. And by the way, if you didn't catch Seth Donnelly from Taxpayers Against Genocide.org, please do watch the video. But yeah, please click subscribe as well. Click like. So this is from Business Insider yesterday afternoon, how Trump's one big beautiful bill would impact Medicaid, student loan forgiveness, your taxes, and more. I was going to talk about why I use the Business Insider article. It was a pretty good article. It was pretty easy to read. It was relatively, they divided it up. It was well organized. And Business Insider is actually, at least according to one site I found, I'll talk about this. This is called the website. And I found this too. I found their articles reasonably credible. So what MediaBiasFactCheck.com/insider says is, hey, they're slightly left center. I guess that's true. And they're high in terms of their factual reporting. So they're credible. That's what MediaBiasFactCheck.com says. Now, you could say, well, how credible is Media Bias Fact Check? And I was thinking I could Google them to see if they're reliable when they give reliability scores, but I decided it wasn't worth it. So we'll just have to assume that Business Insider is relatively credible. Here's what they say. And then we'll get into what I think might be appropriate responses to various points in the bill. The bill includes cuts to Medicaid, and millions could lose health coverage. So that's really bad. That's really, really bad. And you can read some of the specifics. It would increase the cost of doctors' visits, mandate beneficiaries making above the federal poverty limit, which I don't know, what is that, $35,000, $40,000? They have to pay up to $35 for a doctor's visit. Well, I think that's terrible. For families, for many families, including those at or above the federal poverty line, that $35 is meaningful. They're going to not go to the doctor. They'll be paying for insurance, presumably under Obamacare, or some of their amounts to the same thing. Some of their salary will be withheld for insurance, but they're not going to use it. So that's a windfall for the insurance companies. That's just wrong. There should be no charge to go to the doctor. But the goal here, of course, is to, quote, save money, unquote. So people don't use their insurance. People don't go to the doctor. Everything's a little cheaper. Of course, people die. But hey, can't make an omelet without cracking a few eggs. They mandate work of 80 hours a month for childless adults on Medicaid who do not have a disability. All right, on balance, it doesn't sound so bad. Democrats should speak out loud against any copays. That should be the first thing they should be talking about. They should be opposing that. The thing about work requirements, they sound reasonable. It's hard to argue. You don't have kids, right? Childless adults. You don't have a disability. Go to work. I get it. I understand the argument. What I would say if I'm a Democrat, fine. We should have, okay. People should work. And what we need to do is make sure that work is more okay. It's not just miserable, unpleasant, a constant repetition of the same activity, standing behind a counter for 8-10 hours a day for a pittance. Raise the minimum wage. If you're going to shove all these new workers, you're going to force new workers into the workplace, thereby increasing the labor supply, which benefits corporations, benefits employers, then they need to pay higher wages. So that would be my response if I'm Democrats. Okay, we're not going to fight the work requirement per se. What we are going to say is you got to have higher wages. Workers aren't paid enough. They just aren't. And since Trump got his tariffs in, that will reduce offshoring. That will reduce, the loss of jobs as a result of higher wages. So you want to have a work requirement, 20 hours a week, what have you, then raise the minimum wage. That would be my response if I'm, and the response needs to be in unison. They all have to be saying the same thing. They can't be, well, one person says this, oh, I don't have a problem with this, and the other says, oh, this is the worst thing that ever happened. No, you got to be speaking together. The Democrat Party has to have a united message. But what you can also see from this is why, how badly the Democrat Party screwed up by just not simply demanding Medicare for all. In fact, that should be the response should be, okay, well, when it comes to these various specifics, yeah, there should be no copay. And if you're going to require people to work for Medicaid, then you need to raise the minimum wage and make jobs a little less intolerable for people. But the real answer is Medicare for all. And they should unite in support of Medicare for all, which, by the way, would be a very popular position and one that would help Democrats win. Part of the discussion here is how to act in a way, if you're a Democrat, that you make it more likely you're going to win elections in the future. Good luck, that they'll do that, right? I mean, we know that that's not how Democrats act, but would be nice if they would. And this is more just kind of a suggestions that will not be followed for how they can make things a little bit better for themselves and certainly for the American public. There's a lot in this, the Medicaid stuff. Just want to add. So I think it's the Congressional Budget Office estimates that up to 8+ million Americans would lose Medicaid coverage. And I was trying to figure out, well, why? Because it doesn't specifically deny coverage. What it does say is you have to fill out more paperwork. You have to confirm your residency status. You have to confirm your income on a regular basis. All that's going to mean fewer people apply for the program, fewer people stay in the program. There'll be less money for states that help undocumented immigrants. That means less coverage total. Fewer people have health care. Fewer people have Medicaid. All of our health goes downhill. So these are ways the Democrat Party are, hey, this bill is going to make us less healthy. This bill is actually going to reduce the amount of people who take, who get the treatment they need. That's what the Democratic argument should be. I was very intrigued by one aspect of the bill, which is that it provides that states cannot tax hospitals if they want to get the full reimbursement for Medicaid expenses. And I really had no idea why that would be the case. So I just thought I'd explain it very, very briefly. Hopefully I can do this in a way that's understandable. There is this loophole that states have exploited when it comes to taxing hospitals to get Medicaid, to get a maximum amount of Medicaid reimbursement. And what they do, well, I got this from the New York Times, just to be real clear. So the GOP, this is just recent, May 10th. GOP targets a Medicaid loophole used by 49 states to grab federal money. Interesting the way they use the word grab. Taxes on hospitals and nursing homes. And I was thinking, well, they should be taxed, right? I mean, many of them are for profit. They should be taxed. But they use these kinds of taxes in a very special way. And as the New York Times describes it, it's a Medicaid provider tax. What the states do is they tax the hospital for every, based on their revenue, a certain amount. And then they return the taxed money to the hospital, and they bill the federal government for that, for the money that they're paying, because the federal government reimburses states for its expenditures on Medicaid, about 60%, 60 cents for every dollar spent. So I just show you real quick how this works in practice. I did a little worksheet because I really wanted to understand this, because frankly, I didn't understand it. It was kind of a little bit too much for me to figure out on my own and without I would say a pen and paper, but obviously I'm not using a pen and paper. I'm using a computer to type it up. But here's how it works. So the top is before the tax, the Medicaid tax. The bottom is after. You can see what happens. State pays hospital $1,000 for Medicaid service. The federal government pays the state $600, because remember, you get about 60% back. These are round numbers, so it's probably not exactly 60, but about 60. So the state pays hospital $1,000 for Medicaid services and gets 60% back for services that it's providing to the state's residents and citizens. So the federal government's net outlay, it says state's net outlay is $600, but actually the state's net outlay is $400. Federal government pays state $600. State's net outlay is $400. Hospital receives $600. What about the following scenario? The state now says, okay, we're going to pay the hospital $1,100. So we're actually paying an extra $100. We can't afford that. We'll tax the hospital $100. So now we paid $1,100, at least on paper, although we got $100 back from the hospital. Because we paid $1,100, we billed the federal government $1,100. The federal government pays us $660. 60% of $1,100 is $660. We got $660 from the federal government. We paid $1,100, but we got $100 back from the hospital. So we paid a net to the hospital of $1,000. We got $660 back from the federal government. We only paid $340. We just saved $60 on that expenditure. So that's what the states are doing. They're playing a shell game. They're actually charging the federal government more than they're really paying. They're charging it for more than they're really paying. And the Republicans are saying, no, we're not going to play that game anymore. Well, I think, that's right. They shouldn't do that. States shouldn't do that. And the Democrat Party needs to accept it and just say, okay, well, they caught them. They caught the states, and they're not. Now, the reason states do it is because they don't get enough. The Medicaid reimbursement isn't sufficient. And I would make that point if I'm the Democrats. I would say, well, we need to reimburse more. 60% isn't enough. Or the schedule doesn't provide for enough reimbursement for the services. But, the game with the money, where we're paying the hospital back with money that we took from the hospital, and then we're charging the federal government for that. No. So huge loss in coverage. And Democrats need to decry that. They need to demand that all healthcare provided to poor people is free at the point of delivery to ensure the health of the children, but moreover, we think everyone deserves Medicare for all. That should be the proper response. And that would be the popular response. Without question, the popular response. So we're not just talking about what's right. We're also talking about what's politically right. Because we can get into arguments. Well, maybe reparations for the descendants of slaves is the right policy, but we know it's also would be a very unpopular policy. So you have to sell it, you have to present it in a certain light, and make sure that folks don't feel like they're getting the raw end of the deal. You don't have to do that when you champion Medicare for all, because that's what most people want, or at least guaranteed health care. But the Democrats don't demand that. All right, some other real quick aspects of the policy. No tax on tips or overtime, making Trump's 2017 tax cuts permanent. More right. So the first part of that, no tax on tips or overtime, accept it. Don't fight it. Just say, okay, yeah. Because who gets tips? Rich people don't get tips. Billionaires, millionaires don't get tips. Working people get tips. When you have to account for tips, it's a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of, pain in the ass for the employee and for the employer. Now, I personally think you shouldn't have tip wages. I think the restaurant should be responsible, or the hotel should be responsible for fair compensation to its employees without the tip. But it's a very tough sell, and a lot of workers feel like they benefit from the tips, and maybe some probably do make more because of tips than they would otherwise. And also, it's just become part of the landscape. It's just when you go out, you expect you're going to pay, you give a tip to the server. It's just part of the way it goes. So, you know what? You say, hey, you tip your cap. Good idea, Trump. No tax on tips or overtime. We agree with that. No, we don't agree with making the budget cuts, the cuts permanent from 2017, because that's helping the rich, the billionaires, and hurting everybody else. And most Americans don't support it. Most Americans think the rich should pay higher taxes, which of course they should. So, a popular response to making the 2017 tax cuts permanent is, what are you, out of your friggin' mind? You're going to double the amount of the estate tax exemption to $22 million per individual? That's what 11, 12, 14 million per individual. It's not taxed for an estate. The proper response is, no, we need much more higher graduation on estate taxes, not exempting more. We need to start taxing estates over certain levels higher and higher. Over 10 million, instead of 40%, 50%. Over 20 million, 60%. Over 100 million, 90%. That's the right response. And it would be the popular response, because most Americans believe, rightly so, that we need higher taxes on the wealthy. So just some things that the Democrats need to bear in mind. Sometimes some of the stuff that Trump's proposing, don't fight it. Just don't. Okay. Yeah, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. Because again, elites don't get paid overtime. Business owners don't get paid overtime. Who gets paid overtime? Cops. Many cops are paid very well. I believe they should be paying tax on overtime. I guess my response might be, okay, no tax on overtime until you're over 100,000 per annum. Then we're going to start taxing it. That would be my response. Many cops are making 200,000. You think 100 is too low? 120, 130. At some point, when your income is above a certain level, you pay tax on your overtime if you get it. Just ways to be creative in your responses to this big, beautiful bill, as Trump calls it. Final point on that, and I made it before. We can't have a whole bunch of different cats running around in different directions. The Democratic Party has to stand for something. People understood during the New Deal. People understood during the civil rights movement that the Democratic Party stood for certain things. It stood for high taxes on the rich. It stood for full employment with the National Recovery Act and the New Deal. It stood for a clean environment with the City Beautiful movement. I think that was actually under Teddy Roosevelt, but with the Great Society under LBJ, which was kind of a continuation of the City Beautiful movement of Teddy Roosevelt. People understood that's what the Democratic Party stood for. National parks. Expanded health care. Now, no one has any idea what the Democratic Party stands for. Billionaires, just different billionaires. If the party wants to become, now I don't think it will. I'm not a Democrat, I'm nominally a Democrat, but I don't knee-jerk support Democrats. I support Greens. I support alternatives to the Republican Party all the time. But if the party really wants to become relevant, if it wants to become popular, if it wants people to vote Democratic, wants people to not think 3 times before maybe grudgingly voting for some Democrats and also voting for Trump, if that's what the party wants, it needs to figure out a way to have a truly progressive, economically populist platform that it enforces. And if you aren't behind that, if you don't believe in that, if that's not where you are politically, then you ain't a Democrat. And yes, we are absolutely gonna primary you. We're gonna absolutely criticize you. We're absolutely gonna freeze you out of any kind of committee chair position or ranking assignment. Being a Democrat, if the Democratic Party is serious about reforming the party, rebuilding the party, regaining power, then being a Democrat has to mean progressive, populist economic policy. All right, I'll be back Monday. Have a great weekend.